Good evening, everyone. Welcome to an extra special. Johnny, I don't know what to call it when it's not the morning briefing. We'll call it
I always struggle as well. I always find
Yeah.
myself falling over my words, but there you go.
Yeah, we'll call it a cup final briefing myself. And Jonny McFarlane here to look ahead to Rangers League Cup final against Aberdeen tomorrow. It was press conference day today as opposed to yesterday, hence why we've scheduled this in. Philippe Clement's team obviously travelling back from a pretty memorable night in Seville alongside Chris and Derek, so they're both in the cryo chamber today getting ready for the game tomorrow. Jonny, firstly, how's it going? And I know you've been on since Thursday night, but how do you reflect on the last couple of days, not least the fact that obviously we can't ignore a huge game in the context of the title race today that means that Rangers could, if Rangers win their 2 games in hand, they could go to Parkhead top of the table, which, let's be honest, when Michael Beale's last game against Aberdeen, which was a 3-1 defeat for Rangers at home, you'd have got good money on Rangers being top of the table going into the new year, Old Firm. We'll start with that. How do you reflect on, I guess, a big day in the title race for Rangers, even though they've not played?
So, Josh, it's the 15th of October that Philippe Clement was appointed. It's the 16th of December. If you'd said to anyone in Scottish football that by the 16th of December, Rangers could win their 2 games in hand and go top of the Scottish Premiership, they would have absolutely laughed you out of whatever conversation and wherever you were. On top of that, you factor in a Scottish League Cup final appearance and topping the Europa League group. Frankly, this is the stuff of a certain boy wizard who is known to cast spells, which Mr. Clement said that he wasn't. Now, listen, there's got to be negatives to come in future. There's going to be dips in the road for Rangers. I think both of us are too long in the tooth to sort of get carried away. But it's utterly remarkable, this position that Rangers are in. Now, let's put it into context. There's been a lot of good work done at Ibrox. Absolutely no doubt about that whatsoever. But what we are seeing across the city is remarkable. A 2-0 defeat at Hearts, following on from another defeat. This is quite strange to see this going on. And from what I'm hearing, there's a lot of discontent, to say the least, at Celtic Park. It's not a happy camp across there. If Rangers can win this trophy tomorrow, what a level of momentum you have going into that Old Firm game. And given how the crowds reacted, what an opportunity for Rangers to go to Parkhead. Can you imagine?
Well, we should add, I've actually just realised, Johnny, is Rangers will have their second game in hand at the end of January. So it'd still be an opportunity. I think, someone correct me if I'm wrong, it's been a long week, so my maths isn't quite up to speed. But obviously Rangers, I believe the away game against Hibs would be their second game in hand. If someone can correct us if we're wrong. But the point still stands. It's an unbelievable position from the one Philippe Clement assumed. He actually said in his press conference today, Johnny, that I believe the line was, and he made this comment after the win away at Hearts, where he said, I see a team fighting for one another. Compared to the pictures I saw beforehand, I didn't see much of that. And he made a similar comment today, where I'm paraphrasing, but he said the mood now in the training ground is effectively unrecognisable, very different from the one that he inherited. So the point does still stand. This was not an easy job to come into, and Rangers have not won anything yet. If Rangers were to lose tomorrow, for example, that would certainly puncture their momentum, although they go into this game in a good place. But yeah, I guess the point stands, Johnny, that he's been able to really change the tone and the potential of the season, and that's what is there at the moment, is potential to go and make this a far more memorable season for Rangers than it looked like it was going to be a couple of months ago. And he's done that in far from ideal circumstances, because not only has he not had any time on the training pitch, but he's not had many players such he's had Dujon, Sterling playing in midfield for the second half of that game and better. So up to this point, again, it's only potential, but you have to say Clement's put himself in the squad in a very good position on the basis of these past few days and looking into tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. He certainly has. What I like about Philippe Clement, or certainly one of the things that I think he's done very well, is he often talks about, I'm a guy that needs to find solutions, not lament about what I can't do. And that's quite refreshing in a world where managers often do that sort of, woe is me, I've got these problems, etc., etc. He's a very positive character, a very firm in his mind guy. almost reminds me a little bit of previous successful Rangers managers who I won't name because I don't want to get into the situation where you're sort of making these kind of facile comparisons and people kind of run away with it. But just in terms of the single focus that he has when you challenge him on his beliefs, it's clear his core beliefs on football are very, very strong. And he feels like he knows what it takes to win, having won 3 titles as a manager. And so he knows what that looks like. And I thought your question actually today at the presser was quite interesting when you quoted him back, the line that he used, which is he talks about his story quite a lot. And he kind of bristled as if he thought, I was planning to not use that word again or something like that. Because he really, he sort of bristled when you said it. And then he sort of clarified what he's trying to say, you know, English obviously not being his first language. I wonder if he kind of just basically means philosophy when he says story. You know, in a way, he's talking about how he wants to play the game with Rangers. And I think he's just been very, very impressed. I don't think anyone would refute that. Even people not from a Rangers persuasion, Josh, you know, I speak to in the media industry, I've been very impressed by the way he carries himself, by how articulate he is. His English is just, you know, fantastic. I'm old enough to remember Paul Le Guen, and when he was at Rangers, I think one of the problems that he had was his English wasn't quite up to snuff. And this guy's a fluent English speaker. It genuinely just isn't a problem whatsoever. He's able to, you know, communicate at a very high level, despite his own protestations about the use of that word story. But
well, I can give the answer, Johnny, because I think it is an interesting point in perspective. He said the reason that he says it frequently, and I think what he's trying to insinuate is players buying into the overall vision. And he said story is maybe not a good word. English is not my normal language because stories can be fantasies. It's more, I know if the players do the right things together, that success will come. I know in the past, from the past, I know what to do to get success. The players have stepped into that. They're totally focused at every day and meeting and doing the things we need to do together. You can see them growing it that way, making the right movements together with and without the ball. Everyone knows their assignment, whatever their position, even if they're not playing in their normal position. Is anything a guarantee? No, because otherwise Man City would be champions every year, and they obviously dropped points today. So that looks a little bit less likely than previous years. And he went on to say it's never a short-term guarantee, but long-term it is. As long as they are doing this, we will have a successful season together. I'm convinced about that. And I think what he's touching upon there, Johnny, is the fact that he's won titles a few times, and he obviously, as you say, has belief in his ideas and his vision. When you speak to people who have worked alongside him, and one of the pieces that we did recently with Clement's long-term assistant, Johan van Rumst, he speaks a lot about that, how he, as we spoke about in the morning briefing, how he's used psychologists in the past to better understand players, how he tailors his man management so specifically, how he'll, especially in training camps, and Clement said this himself in a recent press conference, he'll take the time to sit down with every player individually, very intentional in that regard. And really, the quote that his former assistant said to me is he wants to be able to brainwash his players, hopefully in a healthy way. But what I think he's trying to communicate with that statement is he wants his players to buy in to such an extent that they have this singular focus into what he's asking them to do. And if they're able to do that, then they should be successful. So I think that was the context of the story comment. But I totally agree with your point overall. I don't think he could have made a better start. Obviously, it all leads into the game tomorrow, though. Do get your questions in about the game, folks. We're going to speak through some of the press conference details, drag up our team, what we think it will be tomorrow. Again, limited options for Philippe Clement in that regard. I want to talk about who plays in that second centre midfield spot. Looks like it may well be Dujon Sterling. Aside from that, the press conference, Johnny, and obviously the press conference was slightly earlier this afternoon. Clement referenced a situation where his Bruges team as a player beat AC Milan away from home and then weren't able to kind of settle down for a game at the weekend. And he said he actually spoke to his players about that, but believes looking in their eyes, they're really focused and ready for tomorrow. I mean, what else stood out for you today at the press conference, whether it be injury updates? Obviously, Todd Cantwell back in training, fantastic news heading into tomorrow for Rangers. Scott Wright back, which obviously given his record at Hampden is excellent as well. And Leon King also available. Philippe Clement confirmed he'd been in a car crash last week, but thankfully that's not serious because he's back in the squad. I mean, what else stood out to you today from the press conference? And I guess the main takeaway being great news that Todd Cantwell's back in there, because Rangers would have really missed him in that number 10 spot if not.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, it's difficult for me actually, Josh, because I was not only at the broadcast, which is where you were, and you were asking questions, but I was also with the written press. So I'm going to try my damnedest not to break any barcodes. It's difficult to kind of differentiate in your head, so I'll try and be as safe as I possibly can. I think the news about Todd Cantwell is really, really, really important. You've got such a diminished squad in terms of injuries, and we know that that's an issue that vexes Clement, and that's something that he's going to be looking at and continues to look at. Having Cantwell back in such a big game, a creative spark like that is going to be big. Perhaps the one real decision is whether or not Cantwell does a job for the team out on the right, or if he plays in the midfield. Personally, I think he's got to play in the midfield. I subscribe to this idea. If you're going to play Cantwell, you play him as a 10. But listen, Clement might see something in playing him on the right in the way Aberdeen play that makes him think that's a good idea. We shall see. I suppose for me, the only true question is, do you put Sam Lammers in there? Do you put Matondo in there? I think the answer to both those questions is no. Other than that, though, Josh, genuinely, in terms of the team, I don't think Philippe Clement has much of an option. I think we've both gone for exactly the same team tomorrow. I think it picks itself. And I don't think there'll be many people in the comments that will disagree fundamentally with what we've gone with.
Yeah, well, good opportunity to bring it up, and we'll speak through some of the key positions. I want to speak about Dujon Sterling as well, because Clement referenced him in today's press conference. We've picked the same team, predicted the same team. As you say, Johnny, there's not many options. I guess the areas of contention would be left centre-back. Presume it will be Leon Balogun come back into that position. Maybe it's dependent on whether Aberdeen play 2 strikers or 1 striker, but I think it'll be Leon Balogun in that position next to Connor Goldson. That is the partnership that Clement has generally favoured, especially domestically, when he's been able to pick Leon Balogun, who isn't in the European squad. Todd Cantwell back in training, and when asked if he was back, Clement said he trained today, so there's a big chance he's there tomorrow. I think we can safely assume that Todd Cantwell will be in the squad, and if he's in the squad, he has to start. Only other area of contention, the right side of midfield. I don't think Kemar Roof's going to start the game. You're probably better placed to have Dessers play the first half and Roof come off the bench, as worked so well in Seville. For me, Johnny, Ross McCausland, I know at points that Clement's been keen to protect him because he's still probably in single digits in terms of starts for Rangers, but he started away that big game, came off after 60 minutes, and there's a few defensive questions about him, but it's going to be a different type of game tomorrow against Aberdeen, where they have more of the ball. I think Rangers look better when Ross McCausland is in the team at the moment. I don't think that right-hand side suits Rabbi Matondo as much, because he's not played as a lot of his football there. Ross McCausland has. He's right-footed, but he's quick enough and agile enough to move inside, can pick a pass, and we saw that again in midweek for the Sima chance where he was just offside. But that's when McCausland came into the team against Sparta Prague. That's one of the things that stood out, not only his ability to provide width on the right-hand side, but also move inside as well. And I think that's actually really helped Abdallah Sima, because beforehand, when Rangers were playing Campbell out there, they didn't have natural width in the midfield, and therefore I think there was more of a requirement for Sima to offer that on the left-hand side. Instead, he's in the box more. He's got 5 goals and 4. We've written about it on the website in the last week, looking at his underlying numbers and how they've upturned regarding his expected goals, his goals per 90, obviously, touches in the opposition box, all the kind of key metrics. So aside from that, there's not many points of contention, Johnny. And I guess starting on the centre-back partnership, you expect Leon Balogun to come back in there because he's not really put a foot wrong under Clement. And although Davies made the mistake for the goal in midweek, or he should have got rid of the ball quicker, I think he did well outside of that. But you'd imagine that it'll be that back four that's generally been Clement's first pick since coming back into the club tomorrow.
Yeah, you look at that and you think to yourself, what did they do? Both Balogun and Goldson are very robust and able to deal with the physicality that Aberdeen undoubtedly have in their team, and will undoubtedly try and utilise as a way to level the playing field, because Aberdeen don't have as good players as Rangers. You're going to see physicality from Aberdeen. Whether or not they sit in a low block or come out, as I suspect they will, and try and go after Rangers from the start, as they did, I think, at Pittodrie particularly well. Either way, Aberdeen are going to be aggressive. I think it's incredibly important as a side point that Rangers, if they're going to win this game, show discipline. This game could turn on a red card quite easily. And given the sort of atmosphere between the two clubs, the passion of both sets of fans, it's essentially 50-50. I think Rangers have got 5,000 or so more fans, but essentially 50-50. So I think it'll be a bit of a powder keg in there. It's very, very important that Rangers don't react to that physicality. They need to be absolutely professional, absolutely switched on, because games like this are decided in moments of madness sometimes. And you certainly wouldn't want that for either team, because you want to see a cup final that is played out 11 versus 11 with the best team winning. That's about discipline at the end of the day. Rangers have got experience throughout this team. I think Balogun and Goldson are both capable of dealing with that physicality. You start bringing Ben Davies in, and then you've got question marks. So that's why I think those two are absolutely obvious and must play. Of course, Leon Balogun is not as good with the ball at his feet as Ben Davies. He doesn't shift the ball as quickly because he's not left-footed. So, but on the balance of probabilities, you definitely play Balogun for me. Barisic isn't, he is what he is. I think, Josh, you probably tear your hair out with Barisic more than I do. I think he's fine, but he's not the player that he was 3 years ago, for example, I don't think. And obviously, I'm pretty sure that he will leave the club at the end of the season with everyone's best wishes. And he will want to go out on a high, the way Borna is. James Tavernier, we know what he can provide, whether it's getting forward, whether it's taking free kicks. He's a guy that will always deliver on the big stage. So, listen, I think that defence is right. You don't have to worry about it. Jack Butland goes without saying is the best keeper in the league by a country mile.
Yeah.
And that's an area of the pitch, Josh, I don't know if you agree with me or not. I just don't have any qualms or any worries about it. I remember staying at the start of the season, I looked at the five centre-backs Rangers have: Balogun, Goldson, Davies, Suter, and Leon King. That's fine. See, for the Scottish Premiership, that is fine.
I think we've touched upon it. Rangers have rotated their left centre-back slot for seasons now. I can't remember the last time they had a guaranteed starter in that position, and that maybe in and of itself, you want a centre-back partnership that is not broken up, whether that be by European football or whether it be, I don't think Davies would play away at Tawdry that much because he's not a big physical centre-half. And Aberdeen, if they're to go two up, and I don't know whether they'll maybe revert to one striker tomorrow depending on the game, then that might give Rangers an extra man at the back, which they didn't have when they didn't start well against Aberdeen. And Aberdeen Rangers haven't beaten them this season, and Aberdeen, I think, are in a bit of a false league position compared to the quality they do have in the squads compared to the rest of the Scottish Premiership. They do have players, I think, as you've seen in a number of recent games with Rangers, who can cause issues. I think their squad is quite well set up to play defensive football, and you've seen that in some of their results and performances in European football as well. So it'll be a really difficult game for Rangers, not least because, as we'll come on to at the end of the show, not least because they haven't made a habit of winning these games repeatedly. And they also, as we'll come on to the midfield, Johnny, don't have an abundance of options. Looks like it might be Dujon Sterling in that midfield position next to John Lundstrom, who I think did well in midweek. Different task for him if he's got a lot more of the ball. Want to speak a bit about his role and how that could come to pass. But I asked Philippe Clement about it today, and he said Dujon is very versatile, not only a good defender, he has good feet, a good pass, a good shot, good physicality. That's why all the problems we had in the last weeks, we needed solutions. I've told you I don't want to be a manager who's always sticking with the problems. I'm here to find solutions, whatever they are. Sometimes I need to look outside the box, and Dujon is also looking outside of the box. First, you need to convince the player and train, and then see if it works. It did in midweek. Unless Rangers are to go for Bailey Rice in there, who hasn't played yet under Clement, or Colin McKinnon, they literally have no other options in there. You'd be looking at maybe pulling Campbell back a line. Here's why I think it's got similarities to his role at right back, Johnny. Rangers, that second central midfield spot, the Rangers are building play outside of the centre quite a lot at the moment, and it remains to be seen how Aberdeen will whether they'll press them high tomorrow or how they'll set up defensively. The requirement for Sterling isn't to move in deep and play next to Lundstrom and play intricate passing combinations. He's in that right side of the triangle, and he's making at points underlapping runs, which he'd be used to making at right back. He has to double up out wide at points, which again he's obviously used to. He has to be busy. He has to cover a lot of ground. He has played higher up throughout his career. We've seen his shot, obviously cannon off the post, would have been an unbelievable goal had he finished that one late on against Dundee, cutting in and curling one into almost the top corner. So I'm not saying he's a central midfielder, but there is some parallels between the role he plays at right back, and not so much the position, but the role and the function of that. How do you see that? Because I know you were impressed with him in midweek, and he's a player who's not really kicked on yet since arriving at the club. He had some injury issues, and he's not alone there. But if he is to start tomorrow, how do you view that position, and how do you view Sterling's kind of future in the squad?
Well, it's too early to really assess his future, Josh. If we're balancing what we say based on what we've seen over the course of the season, I've just not seen enough of Dujon Sterling to give you a full and accurate assessment of what he's capable of and what he can do. I think it's safe to say that he thought, and his representatives thought, that they would be getting more game time making this move. There was Premier League interest in this player. He was someone who I think there was a number of clubs interested in taking, and he felt he was coming to kick on and move on to the next phase of his career. He'll be desperate to make an impact. He's obviously had a lot of time at a huge club at Chelsea and not really been able to make the breakthrough, so he won't want to repeat that, and he'll be hungry to come in here and show what he can do. I've spoken to people who say that he is a player that's got great capability. I think Clement talked about him today, didn't he? I think if you can quote me what he said, Josh, because he talked about his skill set, and if you actually read that back, it's pretty much a rave.
Yeah, as I said a second ago, good shot. Not only good defender, good feet, a good pass, good physically with a good shot. And then went on to effectively say, "Look, I need to sometimes look outside of the box, but Dujon is also."
I was trying to remind myself, and I thought that was interesting, Josh. Right, so he's talking about a good shot. So does that mean that? Listen, I know they all take part in the same drills, but does that mean that he's maybe been used more advanced in training?
Well, I think Clement said that after midweek. They've obviously known, they've looked at it. Obviously, they'll be more aware than anyone. Hypothetically, last weekend, okay, if Cifuentes or Lundstram gets injured, what do we do? And they were prepared for that with Sterling coming onto the pitch. I just think the reason it's worked well so far is because if you look at how Rangers are playing in the middle, they are going quite direct at points. Ties into Sima being a wide forward, ties into the fact that they've not got an abundance of options in the middle of the pitch. And they're trying to go around the block a lot more. But he's looked capable enough. I think the difference is tomorrow in a game, Jonny, where you've got a lot of the ball. How does that translate? Not an ideal situation, but as Clement said, he's not looking to complain. He's looking to find solutions. Aside from that, Jonny, the top end of the park, Cyril Dessers, he starts. You've got to start him after that goal in midweek, and I don't think he'll play the full 90 minutes, but Kemar Roof was able to come off the bench, and suddenly that forward position has a couple of options, when last week you were looking at it thinking that is a real question mark going into the next couple of weeks. Would you, I know this is your predicted team, so you are starting Ross McCausland. Is there any hesitation in your mind as to playing him in such a big game, or do you think Thursday suggests that Clement trusts him to play in a match of that magnitude?
Josh, I didn't think he was great on Thursday. So I would be thinking, if I was Clement, about whether or not I would play him, because I think he can have an impact off the bench and he can have an impact back from the start. The question is whether or not anyone else, a Lammers or a more realistically, a Matondo, in terms of what the fans might want to see. Although I think Lammers is someone the manager does like.
Or Scott Wright's back in the squad. Jonny probably doesn't start.
I don't think Scott Wright. I don't think you can throw Scott Wright.
It gives the option of him coming off the bench, and that's why I think McCausland starts, because it's not a situation where you're thinking, okay, if we start McCausland and we maybe need to bring on a winger for 60, 70 minutes onwards, you've not got an option. Whereas with Scott Wright back in the squad, and we know his record at Hampden, you do have that option of bringing a winger off the bench, which makes me think that McCausland probably definitely will start. And I agree with you, Lammers is someone, Clement picked him up, mentioned him in his post-match press conference, giving him a bit of praise after the win at Betis, but there's no question that Todd Campbell has to play in that number 10 position. And I do think, Jonny, Abdallah Sima's got 5 goals from 4. He's your foreign player going into this.
Yeah,
I really do think that he's been helped by natural width on the right-hand side, because he's playing narrower. He doesn't have to move wide as much. Play's being built even more on the right-hand side, and it allows him, I think, to do what he's good at, which is not play with his back to goal and hold up play, but run onto the ball, attack vertically. And if you look at, I know I've tweeted about 100 times about this in the last week. But if you look at so many of his goals and you look at the position of the number 9, so often it's the number 9 who's cleared the space, who's made a run down the line, as Dessers did in midweek, as Dessers did in the home tie against St Mirren as well. And the location of his goals are also similar. And because of that, he's your form player going into this game, Jonny, isn't he? And it's important that I think Rangers try and create that ideal environment for him, as they have done in the last number of games, because 5 goals in 4 games going into a cup final is if you're not confident, then you never will be, will you?
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, people are running out of superlatives to describe Abdullah Sima. There's no doubt about it. He's been absolutely fantastic. I remember seeing him in pre-season, Josh, and I turned around to you, I think, after the 3rd or 4th game and said, this guy won't do. This guy will not do, Josh.
What did I say to you? I think I stood up. I think I was a Sima stan from the start, I must say.
Good ladies and gentlemen of the Rangers Review audience, Joshua Barrie did defend Sima and defended him for quite a long time while he wasn't doing well. I've got to hand it to him. So he did defend him, but I think he's really come on a game.
Just don't mention all the ones I got wrong, because it probably outweigh 2-1 from this season.
The season is still young yet. Don't be writing anyone off quite yet. People are starting to come onto a game now. If you told me that Cyril Dessers was capable of scoring a goal like that, I would have laughed at you, and I think many people also would have. It's clear that there's more to come from Cyril Dessers, and I'm already, after seeing that, peddling back a little bit from some of the criticism I've given him. I still think it's been deserved, and it's never been personal. But you have to look at a moment like that and say that's a high level move to be able to pull off in a game like that against a team like that. And anyone who's capable of pulling that off, you've got to say they deserve a bit of time just to see if they can pull it together. We've seen really good players in the past for Rangers take a little bit of time. And I, for one, am prepared to give them that for the time being. And I think most people, given the situation, just to go back to it again, Josh, the larger, the macro situation will be erring on the side of giving people the benefit of the doubt, because
it changes
when you've gone from 7 points behind to being able to go 1 point ahead if you win your 2 games in hand, it's a remarkable situation, isn't it? And we've got a cup final tomorrow, and then we've got in March, hopefully, what is the start of another march to a Europa League final, and wouldn't that be something?
Yeah, well, you're right. Rangers obviously haven't won anything at all this season, and they started well under previous managers, etc., all the caveats. The thing they've not done, Jonny, I don't think, is you can't rely on another team slipping up to win a league title, but it can help if you take advantage of it. And Rangers routinely this season and in previous seasons, I don't think they've been in a position to punish the direct rival Celtic when Celtic have dropped points. Obviously, that hasn't been that consistent a feature in the last couple of seasons. They managed to do it last week or whenever it was. Obviously didn't manage to do it when they were away at Aberdeen. Cup final tomorrow. We'll see what they can do. Just finds we kind of draw to a close, Jonny. Clement spoke about the fact that his team made history in midweek with the first Rangers team to beat a Spanish team on Spanish soil. They have a chance to make history again and end a long, long wait to win the League Cup. The last time, it's almost 13 years since Rangers won the League Cup, which is quite crazy to think of. They'll rightly be confident going into this game. As I say, Aberdeen haven't had a great season, but I think their league position is false for the quality they have compared to other players. They're a team who suit defending in a low block. They've got profiles that can trouble you at set pieces. It's by no means Rangers are favourites, but it will require a big performance to go and win, even if, of course, they should win and they should be confident heading to the National Stadium tomorrow. If they do, it's a chance to really, I think, mark the turnaround in mood since Clement arrived at the club. And I'm sure on the basis of Thursday night as well, there'll be a lot of confidence probably amongst fans who are lining up at Hampden tomorrow that Clement's team will be able to get the job done. How do you see the game overall and the challenge of facing Aberdeen, which we know, as we always hear, is such a big rivalry, and Aberdeen obviously have taken 4 points from 6 against Rangers so far this season. It's not going to be an easy one.
No, it's certainly not. And I'm not massively confident about tomorrow, I've got to be honest, because I've seen Aberdeen play well against Rangers. And I want the players to feel that way. I want the players to feel that it's a game that they've got to go and work hard and match their opponents in all the physical aspects of the game. Because if they don't do that, I think Aberdeen have got enough in the tank and enough quality in Miovski up front to cause Rangers real problems and potentially, grab that League Cup away from them. All these games can all turn, as I've already said, on a mad moment, whether that be an offside, a bad refereeing call, a red card, a silly mistake. And there's been so many cup finals down the years that have been nervy and both teams making misplaced passes and settled on a set play or, as I say, a moment of madness. And I think the important thing tomorrow for Rangers, and I've mentioned it already, but I'll mention it again because I think it's so important. It's about discipline. It's about experience. And Connor Goldson and James Tavernier are going to be absolutely massive in that, in terms of transmitting to those other players a calmness and a sense of continuing to just do the things that they know work under this manager. And I'm not a big one for this whole thing of Aberdeen are a small side and Rangers just need to treat them like a small side and treat them with contempt, and Rangers are the bigger club with the better players, and I don't think that's going to work. I think that's been part of the problem. Aberdeen are up for these games with 110%. It's everything. If you walk around the city of Aberdeen before a Rangers-Aberdeen match, the players are getting stopped, they're getting told you have to win, this is everything, you've got to beat that lot. It's not the same here in Glasgow about Aberdeen, but that's not necessarily to be something to be celebrated in a sense of the footballing impact, because I think it then becomes a bigger game for Aberdeen than it does for Rangers. Now, I don't think that's true in this case. This is a League Cup final. This is different. But sometimes I felt in games, Rangers versus Aberdeen, the fine margins of just effort, hard work, graft, physicality sometimes been missing for me on a Rangers end, and I think it'd be quite frustrating to get to the end of the game tomorrow and feel like we're talking about these things again. I don't think that can be just accepted. I don't think it'll happen. I think Rangers will win, but I think it's one that we have to be careful about. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the way I'd summarize it is, I think in these games, if teams are going to try and use different, whether it be set pieces, whether it be direct physical approaches, Aberdeen did to go 2-on-2 with Rangers with their centre backs and strikers at the start of the game at Pittodrie. You don't have to play the game that way, but you have to match it so it does not give them superiority in that aspect of the game. That's how I'd try and describe it. Give yourself a platform to then go and show your quality and play football. We will see if Rangers can do it. We'll both be there. Derek will be there. No, Derek won't be there. Stevie will be there. And Chris will be there as well. Derek will be joining us at some point on the video. We'll have lots and lots of coverage for you before and after the game on what will hopefully be a positive day for Rangers. If you've not subscribed to the Rangers Review website, an abundance of content to keep you busy until the game tomorrow. The relevant links are in the description. Keep your eyes peeled on our YouTube channel. Tomorrow we'll be live before and after the game, as mentioned. Until then, enjoy the rest of your Saturday evening. Thank you for joining us for this extra show, and we'll speak to you tomorrow. Bye for now.